My name is Ed Brice. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing here at Lumension, and joining me today is Paul Henry, noted security and forensic analyst. And I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you, Paul.
Sure.
Paul, we're in a tough economic environment. I'm sure that comes as a surprise to no one. But I'd like to know from your point of view, are the bad guys taking the day off?
You know, absolutely not. What you're going to find is that in a good economy, generally you have to worry about bad people doing bad things. In the current economic situation we're finding ourselves in, we have to worry about good people doing bad things today. I really believe that we're going to see a large increase in the insider threats that are typically poised against an organization. You know, historically, we've always seen a higher incidence of network security issues that came from the public internet. We're going to see that change again this year. I think the focus that we should be applying should be to our insiders.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about IT consumerization and Web 2.0. I don't think you can pick up a magazine today without reading something about that. What exactly does that mean, though, in terms of how do we need to think about security in a Web 2.0 IT consumerization environment?
Well, I think that the biggest shift that we've seen is that we'd always operated our business as a business to consumer type of interface. The tables have been turned. With Web 2.0, it's now a consumer to business interface. We really have to be somewhat more cautious with the flow of information and or data and code, for that matter, that would then be coming from that consumer into our business.
So as I've heard you talk about before, it's really that browser is opening up a window into our endpoint, and if we're not taking steps to mitigate that risk, we're really going to be paying the price for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, the browser has become the new keys to the kingdom. In days of old, you'd hack the operating system in order to gain a foothold in that network. Today, that's accomplished through the browser, and it's because of all of the various new doorways, we'll say, that have been opened up through the browser.
What do you see as some of the key trends beginning to emerge in 2009 and some of the new types of threats that we're going to be having to deal with? Is it just a rehash of the old, or are there some new emerging threats that we really need to be aware of this year and I guess going into 2010 as well?
We are seeing, in a large part, a rehash of the traditional threats that we'd face. We are seeing some new changes, though. A good example would be we typically worry about phishing from a credential theft perspective, but we're finding today that there's a new malware element that's being applied to phishing. Today, instead of being redirected to a website that's going to grab your user credentials, they're redirecting you to a malware-laden website, and you could very well end up becoming part of a botnet for sending spam or actually hosting malware yourself. On the web side of things, we're seeing a dramatic increase in the number of websites that are being compromised to host web-borne malware. These are not your one-off websites. These are very popular websites that are now getting hit. You have to keep in mind today that when you go to a website, you're not looking at content that is only limited to that one web provider. Typically, when you go to a website today, that website host is receiving content for 8 or more sources. It's very difficult as a web host owner yourself to then take control of those media sources and apply some form of security to protect your users. Most, unfortunately, do not.
Well, I think that's really an interesting point. When you look at the use of social media in the workspace, I mean, Facebook is really, I would say, the world's HR intranet. And when people are going onto Facebook, there's a high degree of trust that people have with, quote-unquote friends. And what I see is that these friends are being leveraged to come in and say, oh, Paul sent me a video. I click on the video, and then within that video, there's some nastiness.
Yeah, the social engineering aspect of social websites is, it's relatively untapped, in my opinion. I think it's going to really kick open some doors. You look at things like Facebook, you have your friends on Facebook. Yes, you're going to be somewhat inclined to click on a link provided by a friend. But think of some of the other social sites that are out there, a little higher up on the food chain, like LinkedIn as an example. I now, for the first time, started receiving spam messages for people who are connected to me through LinkedIn. And wherever you see spam, malware is not too far behind it.
Not too far behind. So what do we do? Do we ban Facebook as a business?
You can't. I mean, on the plus side, there's a lot of benefits to the use of that type of technology. It really gets down to the fundamentals of network security. If you have the fundamentals covered, you're generally safe, even from things such as exploits that would run through social media. And what we're talking about here is making certain that, of course, number one, you're patched and up to date on your browser and all of the add-ins. Number two, of course, would be the proper application of privilege. Again, you don't want to be surfing the internet today with administrative privileges, okay? And lastly, of course, would be reducing the threat envelope with the applications that you have running on that PC to minimize your risk there as well.
Okay. I recently read where Antivirus found only 53% of potential malware. Does this mean that I need to think beyond the traditional network defenses and move beyond just AV or a firewall? Is it that time to take an extra step?
Well, personally, I think you're saying 53% is being a little bit generous on your part, because I do a great deal of malware research. Right around the time Obama was getting ready to be inaugurated, I had received an email that purported to claim that Obama was going to decline his nomination.
Oh, interesting.
And it was a matter of trying to get my attention to get me to click on the link. From a lab machine, I did click on the link, and I downloaded an executable. That executable, of course, was malicious in nature. I went out to a couple of the antivirus testing websites that are on the public internet and found that only 4 out of 40 antivirus products were able to detect that malware, and that was, again, malware that I had received 24 hours earlier.
Wow.
So I think personally 53% is perhaps a bit of an exaggeration. In my finding, it's typically 10% or less within the first 24 hours are able to see that malware. Now, looking at the big picture, guys, we got to face it, signature-based antivirus is in fact obsolete today. It has simply been overwhelmed with the amount of obfuscation that the bad guys have available to them. We can't write signatures fast enough. It's as simple as that. We need to look at a different approach entirely. Personally, I like the whitelist approach, whereby you configure only those applications that meet the business needs of your environment, and you only permit those applications to run. Now, if a piece of malware finds its way into your network, it's going to be denied by default. That's the way it should be.
Right. Interesting. I guess just to a question to build on that, then if we go back, tying it back into Web 2.0, and if AV can't keep up and more of my employees are using Facebook and YouTube at work, albeit maybe to help them be more productive, let's hope, would a solution like application security, application control, using a whitelisting approach, would that be an effective solution for me in defending my network?
It would absolutely be an effective solution for you, but on top of that, we have to look at security as being a layered approach. I would absolutely make my first step making certain I was running the most current version of my browser software and all of my add-ons. That's step one. Step two then would be the application control to make certain that no application could run within my environment that wasn't explicitly permitted by policy. If you've got those two covered, you have eliminated the vast majority of the risk that you're going to face on the public internet today. End of story.